It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another week's episode of the Tuesday segment on the MSD on 117.8. It's so great to be with everyone today. Just as I guess an update, this is probably the most urgent thing, but Rachel has asked me today to take over for the whole recording, and I think this is, well, according to her at least, this is the first time that this has happened since she's taken on 2G Talks. And I bring that up mostly to say that I'm very grateful for everything that she's done on this segment. And I can't imagine how busy she must be or what must be going on for her to like take a break, right? And there's been so many times where uh, if it was physically possible, if it was literally physically possible for me to record, I would do it. But in the few instances where it was literally impossible for me to record, I would have her take over, and I asked for her help. And there were actually many times where that has happened. So I'm really grateful for all the things that she's done. And I got to see her in person as well as all of the other Houston members and the other second gen out in Texas and in like the Southeast region, for the first time since the beginning of the year, when we had the second gen retreat. And I was actually really amazed, right? Because now Rachel is running full time, and I think it's amazing that she's able to run full time. And so, however long this period might be, I really hope that she experiences a lot of things, right? And I'm sure she is, right? I'm sure like many things have happened already, but I hope that she really experiences so much during this period, and then like, because it won't be like the entirety of our life, right, that we get to run in this capacity. Or maybe she will, who knows? But I hope that she receives many blessings during this time, that she helps many people during this time, helps the Lord during this time, and really fulfills, the will and fulfill God's purpose for her during this time. And like that's the greatest thing that we can ask for, right? And so I really hope that all of those things are really transpire for her. But yeah, like as I said, like normally she would record like if I was really busy, and so I'm more than willing to take over for that too. So even right now, I'm recording at like 4 a.m. in the morning, and sometimes I'm waking up at this hour, and getting started with the day and getting started with the week. But today, I actually had to stay up until now to work on an assignment. And some of it's my fault. Like some of it I should have gotten done earlier, when I had the time. And some parts of it just is a challenging assignment, so it took me a while too. But like I said, like uh, even though the circumstances are like this, where I had to stay up all night and I'm coming at this time to reflect on the word and to share an MSD and pray in the pre-dawn. And I may be, tired from lack of sleep. It's still physically and literally possible for me to record. And so I'm still grateful that I get to do this and come to you at this time. And there was something that I shared last week, and I think I'm not sure how many people really caught this, and I may not have been completely coherent, because it was kind of like the recording was super rushed at that hour. And I remember that I was actually going to go to bed right when the recording came up, and had I gone to bed like 5 minutes earlier than that, actually, I don't even remember the details anymore, but had I like, not been ready, like and been there in that moment, I wouldn't have been able to record anything. But I was able to kind of like put together something very last minute. But having reflected on it and actually having talked to my wife and also other people about this, I think I had some more time to reflect on some of the things that transpired during the tour. And I want to share this part because I think this came up in the message actually too, or the pastor who I was listening to, deliver the sermon. She referenced this again, like in I think in the announcements or in like the additional word at the very end. But sometimes they're just things that you forget, and this happens all throughout life and in Providence and out in the world and in so many different instances. But we forget something, right? And sometimes you forget it not because like you're not thinking of that thing, but because you just have no reason to in that moment. But the one of the things that we were really reminded of, that we didn't even know exactly, but we should have known, and we could have known, and we could have um, acted accordingly even without knowing, was how busy something is. And I'm really grateful that, the person, actually, the same pastor who gave this message was also the one who asked the question. So I'm really grateful that she asked the question and that she once again reiterated it, on Sunday. But, she asked the question, and I shared this last week, that asking, like, oh, like, in what way can we send reports to something well, right? So that he would receive it well, right? And that he would, be able to respond. Like how do we report well to something? And this was during the leaders meeting that we had. And so, there was a variety of different responses to that, which were really important. But one of the things that, we got as a response to that was, well, one, we're leaders, so we should have there are things that we should be able to resolve on our own, right? And that just kind of totally makes sense, right? Like, and the thing that this reminds me of when God appointed judges before Moses, right? And God appointed people who would handle matters and take care of 10 people, 100 people, thousands of people. And then the biggest matters would go to Moses, right? Because Moses himself could not handle everything, right? Even the smallest of little things. Of course, he's capable of addressing those things, but if he were to spend all of his time resolving even the smallest of problems, then he would not have time to do the big work, right? And he would not be physically be able to handle all of those things. And same thing like when you look at the time of David too. Right, like there's commanders over hundreds, commanders over thousands, and in this way, right, like there's this kind of division of labor that takes place, and this is very, very crucially important. So, like in the first part of this answer, right, there's certain things as leaders that we should actually really know. And this is kind of tied to a previous answer, or maybe it was a separate question, but um, uh, like I think someone was asking us, like, are there kind of things that something tells people that are really important, that he's not able to share with everyone? And the response that we got was that actually the thing that is the most important for something, and the most important things that he says are all said during the Sunday message, the Wednesday message, and the Friday Bible school, right? And also during the Holy Spirit letters. So these are the places, and this totally makes sense if you think about it, right? Because this is where he spends the majority of his time. And the pastor was kind of saying, like, yeah, like there's other normal conversations where things that he kind of needs, and like things, and here and there, like little things, but those things aren't really important. And all of the important things, right? Like, and something he spends like 2 3 days to come up with the Bible school lecture and the Sunday message after that. So he spends most of his time, right? And I think this is a really a key thing for multiple reasons, right? For one, the people who kind of doubt something, and at various different times, many people could be guilty of this, right? Like if we have doubts or concerns about something, and like wonder what he does, like how he spends his time and stuff like that, it's because we really failed to know this, right? Like we think that he spends and lives his life doing something else, but in the effort that he expends to give us the word and to prepare the word, it takes up so much of his time, his effort, his life, and his energy, that if we think that he's sowing somewhere else, if we think that he's doing something else, then we really don't know the heart that he has, the effort that he puts in. and like the thing that he does through the word and through giving us the word. So this is something that really must be known. And the second thing was like just how important this aspect of this is in terms of like our responsibilities, right? Like something tells us everything that we need to know during the word. And so some of the small things that we must resolve in our life, and even the big things at times that are actually very clearly discernible, he tells us during the message, and this is where he gives us the clearest directions. So yes, so like an illustration of this and a manifestation of this that that we kind of got to during the leaders meeting is like there's some things that we should handle on our individual level, and there's some things that we have to kind of consult with the department, come up together and resolve together as a department. And other things within the church leadership with the head leader, and the things that the head leader can't resolve and that the church can't resolve, you bring up to headquarters. And headquarters should resolve those things. And if headquarters together with everyone can't resolve those things, then it can go to Korea and to IMD and headquarters over there, like with all the people that it involves. And for really the things that should absolutely be consulted with the man of mission and cannot be resolved without him, those things absolutely should go up to him and should be shared with him. And she said, of course, like if there are things that must be shared with him from the very beginning, then those things should be shared with him from the very beginning. But what this illustration kind of laid out for us was that it reminded us, right? Going back to the beginning of this, of the reason why I'm sharing this, like it reminded us that uh, you know, he trusts us, right? He trusts us, and that he like there are certain things that we must consult with something like directly, and there are other things that are just common sense, and that he tells us to answer through the word. And so I really thought that this is a very important thing to reflect on this week. And what was shared during this time was that for something like when he responds to reports, he does it in the context of spending 2 3 days of the week preparing the word for, I can't remember if it was for the Bible school or for the Sunday message, right? It was one or the other. And then after having spent 2 3 days preparing the word for the Bible school, he spends the remainder of the week writing the word for Sunday and for Wednesday and for the Holy Spirit letters. So he spends all of his time to do those things, and splitting even like this non-existent time, he uses that time to, respond to our various reports and inquiries and stuff like that. And I think this is the thing that I wanted to that I was reminded of, right? That I wasn't able to articulate last week, and that I that I actually almost forgot right now to bring up too. But like even though we know that, right? We know that that's how something lives, and that's how he's actually always lived, right? In whatever context, right? But in so many instances, we forget that. And like we and then like, we naturally default to asking him questions, like which makes which is completely fine, right? And he encouraged us to ask like the important things. But there's kind of this fine line between asking the things that we absolutely need and versus asking too much, right? And like, yeah, sometimes that line is tricky to figure out, but like even when we do ask the important things, and especially when we're asking things that really aren't important, the thing that we really have to remember is how he spends his time for us, right? He spends 2 3 days writing that word for Friday, like another 2 3 4 days writing the message for Sunday and Wednesday, and in top of that, right? Like whatever time he has remaining is the time that he spends, going through the various kind of different reports, right? The hundreds, if not thousands of different things that require his attention. And so, you know, um, I'm not really saying that, right, to fill anyone with like, like what's the right word here? With this kind of sense of like, oh, you should be embarrassed or ashamed or like or rebuking anyone, right? Like no, definitely nothing like that, right? Like I'm not I don't feel like I have the capacity to do any of those things. But it's more like wow, like we have this to remember and feel that sense of gratitude, of understanding, right? Because what we have with him is a relationship of love, right? And when you have the relationship of love with someone and you finally understand the thing that they've been doing for you all along, which you may have forgotten, right? Or even if you knew, you didn't know the specific details of, when you're reminded of it again, you're just filled with so much gratitude for the things that they're willing to do for you. And this is something that I've forgotten and that I'm very grateful to have been reminded of, right? And something I wasn't able to share last week. And so I really hope that with this, right, like even though I wasn't able to share all the details, and I'm not entirely sure if all the details of that meeting were actually supposed to be private, but I think this is kind of enough to share with everyone. But I hope that we're once again reminded of everything that something does for us. And after the break, I'm going to have like one major segment that's like going into the word for this week, and also something that I got from reading the Bible this week. But I wanted to really remind people of this because this is so important, and this actually connects to the word too. And in some ways, it's really sad, but in other ways, it's just something that we really have to understand and come to deal with, and even be grateful for. Right, like as was mentioned in this segment, right? We have to really understand what he's doing for us and be grateful for those things. And it's not just what something he's doing, but the things that God is doing for us, right? And we have to be reminded of the things that God, Jesus, the Holy Son, and the Holy Spirit continue to do for us. And so, with that, we'll go into our break for today. And then after that, we'll go into this reflection based on the Sunday message, as well as from reading the scriptures.
All the words secretly shared by the Spirit, even now I will keep them in mind. I will live by her word. Fish that leave the water die, they simply can't survive. Like this, I am just the same. Loving you is my joy, it's what makes me happy. It is my hope and it's my joy. The Holy Spirit said this to me: everyone lives according to their own thoughts throughout their life. This is really true. People live in this world always according to their own thoughts, thinking in this way in my body and in my heart. I'll be one with the Spirit. It is my hope and it's my joy. The Holy Spirit said this to me: everyone lives according to their own thoughts throughout their life. This is really true. People live in this world always according to their own thoughts, thinking in this way in my body and in my heart. My love and the Holy Spirit's love, the Lord's love shall be eternal. Our love is
Awesome. So hope you guys enjoyed that break. And so going right into things for this segment on Bible today, right? Looking at the word today. Like currently on my Bible read through, I just finished reading through Second Samuel, like reading through the story of David, and I'm like going through the story of Solomon, right? And like how it went from David to Solomon. Right, so if you like look through like the end of Second Samuel and going into like Kings, like you get to the part where it talks about how David wanted to build the temple of God, right? And I'm sure everyone remembers the story, right? Like so David like after doing all the things in his life, he wanted to build the temple of God. And at first, right, like when he asked the prophet, the prophet Nathan, like whether he should, like the prophet told him, like, yes, go ahead, God will be with you. But after Nathan, the prophet, had told David this, he receives a vision from God that says, that you are not the one who are to build a temple for me, right? And one of the reasons was that like David was a warrior and he had spent like his entire life at war, right? So like his hands were bloodied, and even though of course God used him as a tool for different purposes, it wasn't it wasn't David who was supposed to build God's temple, right? But of course, like, David still celebrated because God had blessed him and said that, you will always have, a king, right? Like sitting on the throne, right? From your lineage, right? Like from your line, right? And David once again was reminded how he himself in the beginning was just a lowly shepherd, right? But he was elevated to the position of a king, right? And the ark and the covenant of God was, and the tabernacle was brought back to his kingdom, during his life, right? And so many of these tremendous things that happened in his life. So he, worshipped and he celebrated, right? And like, he said, God told him that, your son Solomon will be the one to build the temple too, right? And so, I read through that portion and I read through the subsequent part with Solomon, going through the early stages of his life and finally getting to the part where he actually goes and he builds the temple of God. Right. And once the temple of God is completed, right, like and like they move the Ark of the Covenant like into the temple, right? Like it says that Solomon, right, and the priests, they sacrificed so much, right, that it was beyond measure. They weren't able to even count the number of sacrifices that they made to God, right, because of the joy that they felt, the thanksgiving that they felt from having, this complete, right, of finishing building the temple, of having the Ark of the Covenant, which had always, gone with the Israelites and always lived within a tent, right? But finally now it was able to be situated inside, his holy temple, which he allowed Solomon to build. So imagine the joy and the gratitude behind that. Right, so reading that portion, it reminded me of this week's Sunday message, right? And I'm sure everyone can guess like which part like this is talking about, right? And it's the part where something like talked about building the natural temple, right? God's temple of this time period, which is far greater than even Solomon's temple that he built for God, and Solomon's temple that no longer exists, in the state that it did in the past, right? And so like looking and reading this portion of the message, and in fact I have it pulled up to share with everyone. It says, when I told Jesus, if we will be if we will develop a training camp anyway, isn't it better to go to a location that has a lot of space and flowing water too? At that, Jesus let me know God's will and purpose a little bit, since I should not be completely unaware of God's will. Jesus said, don't saints center on the places they were born? Are water and environment important? No matter what, they work, centering on the places they were born. God, too, works, setting his will on the place where the manna mission was born. And after hearing that, I gave up on the thoughts of going elsewhere and I developed Warmingdong giving thanks. God continued to teach me every time I take action about the will and purpose for which he started making Warmingdong, right? And so like this is what something you shared, right? So like this is so shocking, right? Because we've heard this part many times before, but this goes back to the thing about being reminded about something. But it's like imagining what would have happened to Providence and something now had he given up on developing Warmington and had he gone to develop something else. Maybe he could have made a soccer field and just a sports field for Warmington, but it would not be the natural temple. It would not have the ambition masterpiece. It would not have and fulfilled all of the legends of Warmingdong, all the legends of the mountains in the nearby area, all the things that God used, all these prophecies that God used to fulfill His will, to show that He's been working for 50 years. All of these things had something named not continue to take action on these things. And of course, God would have, continued to act according to his purpose, right? And he always finds a way, right? But like just imagining this alternative world where this may not have happened, and how devastating and how unfortunate that would be, knowing what we do now about what it is that God was intending to fulfill, right? So this tied to the temple at Solomon's time and the fulfillment of God's promises to David and Solomon of being able to build the temple. Like at that time when the temple was completed, Solomon was so joyful and all of Israel and Judah were so joyful that it was completed. And in the same way, looking at our life now, because Warmingdong has been completely developed, we too are that joyful, and we must be that joyful, right? Like it says they were so thankful and joyful that they sacrificed animals beyond measure, right? In the same way, we have to pray beyond measure to really thank God for allowing us to build Warmingdong and fulfilling his will in these last 50 years. Because imagine the alternative, right? And I really thought about this the other day, like thinking about this, right? Like uh, because Warmington was finished completely and developed in the way that it is, even with everything else that happened in Providence otherwise, no one can say anything against something, and no one can really say anything that sticks or makes sense, right? Because he has something so lasting, because he has something that is so complete that no one can look down on and that no one can denigrate and take away from him, right? Like no one can take away the ambition masterpiece. And so this actually really made me think of like all of the messages within these last few years telling us to evangelize using Warmingdong too, because there's no place like Warmingdong in the world. And not just that, right? Like this really is a sign of everything having been fulfilled within Providence, right? Like no matter how many people oppose, no matter how many people like internally like close to something and were with him and he developed them and he left, Warmingdong is still there even if those people left, right? And Warmingdong being a sign of God's temple and of His throne here on earth, that makes things so much bigger, so much grander, so much more perfect. And I really just wanted to bring that portion up to mind, right? And there's one other portion, and we're actually gonna like conclude for today pretty early, but there's a part right after this segment in the message that I wanted to bring up before concluding today. And I'll read this part first, and then I'll kind of share like why I wanted to bring it up, and then I might read it one more time right after the reason kind of sets in with everyone, right? But it says that at the very end, right, like that God continued to teach something like every time he took action about the will and purpose that he had for Warmingdom, right? Like as something he took action, right? And after this, it says, with God's purpose set before them, People agonize without knowing the purpose and future at the time when their destiny is being determined. As a result, they resent God and dislike the work, saying, "This is not a will." Right? And it says, "If you do not know, you will end up offending God's heart." And I guess I'll read a little bit further, right? So it says, "God who loves us has carried out his will and purpose, having mercy on us, and even when we cause a conflict in ignorance sometimes. After listening to today's message, you should realize this and give thanks." Right? So like this whole thing was what came after something he shared how God, led him to create War Home. And this part was important to me because recently I've been mm, thinking a lot about my brothers and sisters who are going through a hard time. And I don't know entirely everything that they're going through. And some of the things that they're going through may be, lesser than what I know or what I think. And some of the things that they may be going through may be more challenging or more difficult than what I think, right? But I think that this passage captured everything, right? That, with God's purpose set before them, people agonize without knowing the purpose and future at the time when their destiny is being determined, right? So because of that, they resent God and dislike the work and say, "This is not a will." But if you do not know, you will end up offending God's heart. And, this really came to mind because I think all of us, right, like this whole thing, and today's whole segment is about this, right? We do things without knowing, and we cause problems for God, right? We offend God's heart, right? But as the last part says, God who loves us, has carried out his will and purpose, having mercy on us, even when, right? Having mercy on us even when we cause a conflict in ignorance sometimes. Yes, and I really wanted to bring this up because yeah, like and maybe I'm overstating just how difficult of a time it seems like people may be having. Some people may be having, not everyone, right? And I hope there's many people who aren't having a hard time, right? But we really have to wonder, uh, like and think about the fact that our present suffering are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us, right, in the future, right? In Romans 8:18, right? And I think the scriptures were really perfect for this, right? Your destiny is determined by a set purpose, as it says, right? Uh, right? And like in John 16:33, he says, "In this world you will have trouble, but take heart because he has overcome the world." Right? And like he's told us these things so that we may have peace. Right? And I think this like just it just sets it so clear from us, right? That yeah, right now, in certain senses and in at certain moments in our life, we may have suffering, but to take heart because there's something greater that awaits us. I think everything from today's segment has alluded to this. The fact that something spends, all of his time, writing this word for us, receiving it from the Holy Trinity, fixing it 7 to 8 times before he sends it out to us so that we can understand it perfectly, right? And yet we ask for more. Yet we ask for different things. Yet we ask for guidance in different ways. And sometimes we need it, of course. But uh, at the same time, if you think about this, right, like, and this may be the last part, but like, even in the world too, um, we determine our destiny according to the purpose that we set. So we don't need someone to tell us what to do at all times. And yet something has done it for us anyways. And he's done it at the highest level, which is through the core messages, right? And so sometimes we may want particularized directions, but even for something too, like he didn't receive all of it at once, and even if we were to receive it, we wouldn't be able to fathom it all at once. But God always informs us of the things that we must know in order to take action in accordance to His will. And the greatest thing, as we said in Romans 8:18, is that our present sufferings, no matter what they may be, and no matter how big they may feel at the time, are not worth comparing to the glory that will be revealed in us. And this is both talking about the distant, far spiritual future, and it's also talking about, just the after this time passes. And so I really hope that each of us will really be able to reflect on this message, and after hearing this word, really live a life of gratitude towards the Lord. And so with that, we'll be concluding for today. And I think we have one final quick thing before concluding. But I'm really grateful to have spent this day together with everyone, and because I physically had the time to record, to be able to, use, my time together with you guys like this. And so thank you to P Sky, thank you to Rachel, thank you to everyone who's listening on this segment, to my relatives on my wife's side of the family who have been so diligently and giving us so much support. I'm so grateful. And I'm so grateful to my wife too for all of her continued support. Oh, and last but definitely not least, I also wanted to say congrats to P Sky. I don't know how much I can really say, right? Because I'm not sure yet at this point how much he shared on the MSD. But I can't wait for, for more details, and I really wish him luck with, with this upcoming thing. So congrats again to P Sky, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of the week. Bye.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this.